we're going to continue on looking at UVs, and we're going to continue looking at the cylindrical mapping tool. We'll take a look at the head as well. That's a pretty tough area to get mapped up correctly. And a lot of times when I'm doing portrait work, I will use the cylindrical mapping as a starting point. This head shape is a bit more odd than a normal human head, but we'll try it out and see how this goes. So we're going to go into the polygon menu subset, and we're going to go to create UVs and do cylindrical mapping. Just hit that. And I'm going to push this thing all the way around as far as the cylindrical mapping and what it is actually mapping. The other thing, if you remember from the earlier section when we did the chest, we're working on just half of this model, and so it's going to look at the overall volume of the model and put it in the pivot point of the center of that. And so we need to push that over into the center. So we'll just take this projection and go in the center on X and put 0, like that. And then the cylindrical mapping type usually always has some kind of issue with maybe some point, and it's usually at the top area that it kind of has issues with. So we're going to go ahead and just take the results that it's going to give us. Now we can take the UV right here in the UV texture window, like that, and we'll go ahead and try their unfold tool and just see what it is that it gives us. Okay, so this is what we have. Again, we could just push this thing into this portion of the UV texture area, the 0 to 1 space, and we could even throw the checker texture on there just to see how it's kind of playing with that. Not really sure why it's doing this drawing like that. Maybe it's because the screen space human occlusion is turned on. I can turn that off. But if we were going to paint on this, it is possible that we could get a fairly decent look just right out of the box for what's going on here. The things that I don't really necessarily like is that it takes the teeth and kind of what it does to the teeth. It's possible that I could share all the resolution on that. The other thing is, if I wanted this to be unique on one side of the face as opposed to the other, I'm going to have specific UVs for this side as well. I'm going to have to flip that. We kind of talked about that in an earlier video, how we can get something flipped. So imagine that same kind of scenario that we did on the chest. We made two different versions of the chest. We did a chest that was just there you could paint across it, and then the other one where you would have like the front and then the back to this thing. So really with a head, you would actually have this thing here. Let's hide this part right there real quick. We would actually take the head, and I'll just duplicate it, hit Shift P to unparent it so we can take a look at this. I'm going to hide everything except for the head, and we'll turn on our texture borders, and we'll also put on this color coding thing to let us know whenever this thing's flipped, the UVs are right here. So I'll make a duplicate of this thing, the head, and give it a negative scale on X again. And then this time we're going to go ahead and freeze the transformations on it. And we're going to go modify, freeze transformations. It should turn red because now we're looking at it on this side and the UVs are not facing the same way that it's facing in the world. So we can right click, say UVs. We can go ahead and flip that using the flip horizontal. And then we can just take this and push this over. Okay, so now if we take these two objects and we join them together, we're going to do a mesh combine, delete the history on it, and then I need to select the verts going down the center of this model like this, and then we're going to do shift right click, merge vertices option box. We've got a really low threshold like that. Okay, and I'll turn off this texture thing just to view the model, and we'll take it off of shading, and we've got flood shade all. We'll do smooth shade all and go to normals, soften edge, and if we did it correctly we should get soft normals across the whole thing. We don't, so it looks like maybe we need to up that threshold, or we could do this. We can go to display polygons, custom polygon display, and we'll just leave border edges on, and you can see where it didn't sew it up correctly. We've got still this thick line because the border edges is turned on, and we can just tap F9, and we'll say merge vertices to center here. Looks like we got an issue here, so tap G, and then take a look around the rest of the model. Looks like we got an issue here, so we'll sew that up, and we're good to go. So now I'm going to delete history on that. We can take a look with that checkered texture on there again, and then like I was saying, we really need this thing to be joined up together at a certain point. So I'll select all these edges. We can select it all the way, let's go from here down like that. So I just double clicked on it. I need a loop, so I need to hold down shift and keep clicking until I get that entire area selected. And I could select in the 3D view, and I could select within here. So I'm holding down control and shift and adding my selections of edges. So I've got this thing all the way up. I don't need this edge, and I don't need that edge either. Let's just sew these together. It's going to look kind of odd, but now what we can do is go to UVs. We could use the unfold tool. We could use that one, so that's possible for us. I'm going to hit undo, or we could use this one here where it's going to try to unfold. It's a different algorithm. It seems like this one actually does work a little bit better, so I might be able to run that just a few times. It looks like everything's good to go on that. So now if I turn this off, this would actually sit in the 0 to 1 space, and I'd have to scale it down. And I'm going to take this, I'll delete the history on it, and I'll call this head UV example 02, because this is a different type of mapping. This one's going to let you have a unique texture all the way across the model on both sides, and it looks fairly decent. Looks like it'll work fairly well. And you could go into Photoshop and you could paint this thing, and I think it would make sense for you. And if you wanted to share UVs, if you wanted to share paint, you could paint one side, and in Photoshop you just flip it, and everything's symmetrical, so that should work out okay. Now I would take these UVs here and maybe scale them apart just a little bit, and take this and maybe scale that out just a little bit on there, and then maybe take a look at what we've got going on here. I think that looks okay. So let's see what part of the fin. So it didn't join those two pieces together. So let's actually sew that up, and let's sew this up like that. Now I think we're doing better here. So this is one method. Again, if you wanted to have specific scarring on one side versus the other, you could do that. So that's one version. Let's delete the history on it, and I will get rid of this empty group stuff. I'll put it in the build temp group, and I was missing my M. I did find out what the problem was. It was because of the recording software that I had a hotkey set to M, so it was interfering with Maya. So that had nothing to do with Maya. It was all my recording software. Okay, so this is this one example, and let's bring everything back like this. There's just our one head like that, and I'll put that next to the head group that we've got. This is something that's left over. Let me get rid of that. So we got this, and here's our build group for our head. Let's just middle mouse drag that up, put it right under there. Okay, so here's our other head. I'm going to hide this one. And in this example, we would have to say for the right side, we already looked at this, that we would, if we wanted specific scarring on this version, we would have to make a copy of it, because this is a negative instance, so I'd have to hide this whole head like this. And because it is an instance, there is a way to convert this. I'm pretty sure this is an instance, so let's see if this is right. Modify, convert, and I believe there's an instance to object like that. So it's telling me that this is not an instance, so we're good to go. I was just a little paranoid that if I started doing some stuff to this thing, it might mess some things up. So we got a negative scale in there. We're going to go modify freeze transformations, and again we need to do this to our model. We would flip it, but if we're trying to make the UVs share one side with the other, we can leave it. And then now I would have to say I'm going to just split it across here like this. And I'm going to get rid of these, and I'm going to cut. Just holding down Control and getting rid of those selections. And I would have to cut this, and let's turn on the texture borders. And then now I could take this section and move it like this. And because I've got this unique, I might as well just take it and tap Q, and then I'll flip it like this. Okay. And so now when I look at this, let me sew this piece up real quick, just because I'm really picky about stuff. Delete the history, and then we'll bring back our head, and I'll hide this right one because we've got this new right one that we just made. So if I select these two together, you can see what we would have. We would have something that we could paint a texture on that works across both pieces, but if we needed something unique, we kind of busted off just that part, gave it some new space on the map like this, and not everything's actually even fitting, so we'd need to do some work for that. So we'd have to scale it down like this to where everybody fit on the page. And then now in the paint program, you could paint something that's specific on here, and then you would have this part that's busted off, and then you could do something that's very specific just to this side. So like I was saying, maybe there's an acid burn or something like that, or there's a big scar. If you look at the concept of our guy, there's actually on one side, he does have a scar over his eye and over his lip. So this is how you could still share all the texture space for this chunk of the head, but if you needed to do something very specific for a certain area, you could just break that part off and have it be separate on the map over there. So going by the concept, really we only need maybe this area right here, and I split off the whole chunk of the head, but we'll be good there for that. So the other thing is, now that we have these pieces, I'm going to take this right side, I'm just going to get rid of it, and this will become my new right side. Again, the old one was an instance, but we're moving away from that stuff, so I'm just going to middle mouse drag this up into the head group. And so this is what we have now if I select those two together. And I want to get the chest, the arms that we've made so far, and we need to start working on fitting these things all on a page. So I like to give more real estate to the head, so I'm going to give more space to the head like this, and we can change our grid view as well. So this might help if we do this. If we hit apply real quick, I'm going to do subdivisions to, actually I don't even have subdivision lines turned on, so let's turn those off. So we'll do grid lines every 1 unit. Let's try that. Okay, that's going to give us this. Now if we do 0.5 for grid lines, it should split it in half. So you can imagine if this was a 512 by 512 map, this square represents 256, this represents 256 squares right there. So you could kind of use it that way. If you wanted, let's see if we can do this. I'm going to try to get this thing split into thirds, so something like that. That's going to be 0.25. Let's see if I did 0.33, and yeah, it's not really working out so great. So I think this will be better if we just do 0.5 like this. Like I was saying, if this is going to be 512 by 512, it's going to be easy for us to understand that this is going to be 256 by 256 for the size that we're looking for. And I would try to give an entire quadrant maybe to the head. And then now we've got this thing for our chest and our back, and that's pretty large compared to that, so we'll have to scale that down. We can put that like right around here. We've got our sleeve for our character. Maybe we could put that here like this, and then this is this part of the arm, and we can start to fit it here. And this really looks like this kind of spacing is still not giving more of the priority to the head. If I did something like this, where I'm going to move this, and if it keeps doing this weird snapping thing, I just tap W and put it on the regular moving tool. I've noticed that when using this tool, sometimes it does that. And so I'm just going to lift up just a little bit here like that and push this over. And then now I'm going to take all this and scale it this way, uniform, and see if I can't give a little bit more priority to the head. Now when you do this, this is a it's kind of like a 3D puzzle that you got to kind of figure out, and you got to rearrange certain things and give certain things the right amount of space on the map. And so we can do that. Let's turn on our texture thing, and the bad part of this is that it only works with the texture whenever you've got just that specific piece selected. So you can see if I wanted to try to fit everything on this page, once I get all the UVs done for this, it's going to be a bit of work to get everything kind of pushed out exactly where it needs to be. So let's see, we had this part of the head as well, and we had the chest, and so I did forget about this piece here, and we'll select this and move it, and we can do some scaling on both these pieces. Because this is on the inside and underneath, it can be a bit smaller than everything else. I don't really need that to be that large because I'm not going to really be looking under here all that much. I'll be looking on the top more, so I could give the top more priority. So I can move this over here like this. So you can see already with those few pieces, we're starting to get a pretty good layout. And make sure you don't overlap past that 0 to 1 area. That's not a good thing. So let's take this and we'll move it back just a little bit. Make sure you're giving enough bleed around each object, and you're giving enough bleed right at the edges of your texture map as well. That'll cause drawing issues if you're not careful with that kind of stuff, and it'll show up as like kind of maybe black shading or some dark shading along the UV borders. So that's just some things to be on the lookout for. So this is basically your process that you have. You have to set up the UVs for each different piece. You have to organize them on the page correctly, and I'm still looking for this little piece here. Do here, and like I was saying, that is your job. Your job is to set up the UVs and get everything ready to go so you can actually texture the thing, and once that's laid out, then you can actually start painting the textures, and we'll get into that process more. But we definitely have to set up the UVs before you can start painting on your model.